Welcome to Paranormal M, where the unknown becomes reality. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for the latest eerie stories. Prepare for a bone-chilling experience. I think I fell into an unused dimension. So this is something that happened to me and my cousin a few years ago. 31 years old now. And I believe I was about 27 or 26 when this happened. I lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania with my cousin, and we lived on a small apartment complex in the middle of a densely forested area. Had a freeway that runs through the middle of the complex. That leads to a highway, which we used to walk to work. And yeah, we walked on a highway to get to work. That shit was scary. So back to the story. Took place over the time span of 3 days. The shift itself only lasted about 3 seconds, but when the shift was over, we had lost about 40 minutes of time. So we worked in a Wendy's in Lancaster. We both worked the same shift as we requested because we liked working together. We always had fun. So one night at around 3:30 in the morning, which is around the time we usually were walking home because we closed the store at 1, usually takes us at least an hour and a half to 2 hours to do everything, so... As we were walking down the freeway that led to my house, because my house was literally a few feet, maybe 50 or 70 feet away from the freeway, my cousin lived not too far from the freeway himself, he literally just had to leave and walk down the road and run between that apartment complex that served as a way outside of the complex, and we were talking as we usually did to pass the time. As we walked, we noticed what looked like a headlight. It was bright and kind of blinding running down the freeway. But there was something odd about the light. It was way too bright for any car that I knew. But I chalked it up to being a new kind of brighter light that I didn't know about. But also there was the fact that there was only one light, so I assumed it was a motorcycle. I didn't really think anything of it at the time, but in retrospect, now I think about it, we also didn't hear any motors or any other sound that you'd hear coming from a motor vehicle, unless it's electric. So we continued walking and talking. But we moved to the opposite side of the road to ensure that whatever motorcycle or car was going by wouldn't hit us. It was dark outside. And when I say dark, I mean dark. There's literally nothing around us, at least other than the road that we were walking on and the trees on both sides, which were, like I said, densely forested areas. And at this time of night, you literally couldn't see anything beyond the first few rows of trees. There was no streetlights, and literally all you could see was darkness. Even with our phone flashlight, it was only possible to see about 5 feet ahead of us. But since we walked this road every night, we didn't even use the flashlights anymore. We just knew where we were going and it didn't bother us. So we continued talking. But after a few moments I thought, why hasn't this motorcycle passed us yet? Still looking up at the road of the light. And now let me describe this freeway to you. This freeway was a concrete road running down into a highway with a densely forested tree line and a small bridge that was pretty much the border of the apartment complex under this bridge, and it was a small creek that ran through the forested area and around the apartment complex. And on one side of the bridge was our apartment complex and the other side of the bridge was the forest. The light was still coming towards us, but once it reached the bridge with the small creek running under it, it disappeared. I looked at my cousin and asked him if he had just seen that. He said, yeah, that was crazy. So I asked him what he'd seen. He said he saw what looked like a headlight, thought it was a motorcycle, but it just disappeared. So I told him, yeah, that's what I saw. Glad he saw it too, because I thought it was just bugging. Okay, so we shrugged it off, paid it no mind, and forgot about it. So the next day, once again at around 3:30, and we were walking home from work. We were closing the store, and again we reached this road. Again, after coming back down the block, as we're walking and talking, we see this light speeding down the road faster than it was the day before. This time we stopped walking and talking and just looked down the road to watch the light and see what happened. Once again, true to form, a single bright light raced down the freeway. But this time it didn't just disappear, it kept going past the bridge. Once it crossed over the bridge with the creek running under it, it made an extremely sharp left turn. It's absolutely impossible for any form of motor vehicle to make at that speed, which this light was moving. So once it made that left turn, it flew into the tree line, flying through all the trees. And at this point, me and my cousin looked at each other and said, "What the fuck?" Then we started to discuss what we'd been saying, like things like it's impossible for anything to run through the trees like that at that speed. There's no car or bike or anything in the world that could safely do that. At this point, we were still watching the light fly through the trees. Made it about 200 feet into the tree line without crashing into anything, dodging through the trees before it suddenly just disappeared. We continued walking up the road with a weird energy in the air as we both had just seen what happened and we were a bit uncomfortable. So we walked and talked as always. But this time we were wary and looking around for us for any odd experiences. Now here's where things got crazy. It's our third day coming home from work walking down this road. But this time, as we walk down the road, we're literally talking about the experiences we had over the last 2 days on this road. So now we're about a quarter of the way down the road, but this time we don't see that weird light. So we're walking and we're talking about what it may have been. And at this point, we're walking pretty close together. I'm standing about 1.5 feet behind my cousin, and we're talking pretty much just talking over each other's shoulders. He's looking over his shoulder at me, and I'm looking over his shoulder at him. And while we talk, at this moment I pulled my phone out of my pocket and checked what time it was. It was because we had left the store at 2:58 a.m., and it was now 3:37 a.m. So as we walked and talked, mid-conversation, the whole world seemed to disappear. There's no warning, there was no shifting effect, no dragging effect, no melting effect, nothing. Just 1 second the world was there, the next it wasn't. Kind of like when a game clips or fails to load properly. So in mid-stride, the world just disappears. I stopped moving, I stopped walking, stopped talking. Just looked around trying to figure out what the fuck was happening at this point. 1 second ago I was on the road in a densely forested, extremely dark area, and the next I was standing in what looks like an unused dimension. To give you a picture of what it looked like, there was no road, there were no trees, there was no darkness, there was no sky, there was no floor, it was just white everything. There were no shadows, there were no shades. It literally looked like I was standing in an unused piece of printing paper. It's like the best way I can describe it for anime lovers is like the first time Goku ever stepped into the hyperbolic time chamber. It was just white everywhere. There was nothing I could even see. My cousin was standing just a second ago, 1.5 feet away from me. I was scared. Didn't know what to do. I stopped walking mid-stride with my foot still suspended mid-air. Looked around for about 3 seconds. That's as long as the dimension slip lasted. And just as unexpectedly fast as everything disappeared, it was as fast as it all came back. Now I was back on the road, I could see the trees, I could see the road, my cousin was a little farther ahead of me, and I remember before the dimension slip. Before everything happened, he was only about 1.5 feet away, but when we came back, it was more like 5 feet away. I attributed this to him not stopping when the dimension slip happened. The reason I stopped when the dimension slip happened was because I had read a few paranormal books which included chapters on wormholes. I read a few stories in which people say that when they were in wormholes, any small movement they did sometimes landed them hundreds of feet or sometimes miles away from where they started. But clearly, my cousin was unaware of this. It took maybe another step or two and whatever happened, happened. But when everything came back, me and my cousin stopped and looked at each other. First thing that came out of my mouth was, "Did you see something?" And he said, "Yeah, what the fuck?" So I asked him what he had seen. He said that it looked like, to him, the brightest lightning bolt he'd ever seen. Like, you know how when light flashes, when lightning comes down and it makes everything turn white? Well, like that, but 100 times worse. Couldn't see anything. Told him it sounded similar to what I'd seen, but I didn't see any lightning bolt. There was no lightning anywhere, just everything turned white. He said, yeah, he did actually see like a lightning bolt. That's just the only way he could explain what the fuck he'd just seen. I was like, so you did see the same thing? Like everything just turned white and there was no shadows, no shades, there was nothing, everything just disappeared, no trees, no road, no you, no me? He said, yeah, exactly. At this time, when I was pulled my phone back out and just checked what time it was, I don't know why, but I have this habit of every time something happens, I look at the time. The clock read 4:20. Now, I know I literally just looked at my phone about 3 to 5 seconds earlier and it said 3:37. There's no way it's been 45 minutes since. I told my cousin to look at the time and showed him his phone. He said, "So what are you trying to show me?" I told him a few seconds ago I looked at the time and it was 3:37. He was like, "Nah, get the fuck out of here, you're lying." I told him I was dead serious. After arguing about the time change, we looked up and realized we were no longer where we were when the dimension slip started. We were about 25 minutes, maybe half an hour walk down the road from my house. But now, we seemed like we were past my house. Not by far, though. We were literally about 200 feet away from my house, just 2-minute walk back. But it was still fucking crazy. Like, we know that's not where we were before all of it happened. Me and my cousin don't really talk very much anymore, but every now and then we still see each other and chill. But still to this day, every time we see each other, we talk about that night. Has anybody else experienced anything like this? Please let me know, because as far as I'm aware, I've never met anybody else who's had this happen. I think me and my cousin are the only two people who's ever seen anything like this. I think my ghost stole my phone to make a point. So this was a few years ago. Me and my ex, which at the time was my girlfriend of 8 years, was living together in a small apartment in Manhattan. We were having some serious relationship issues at the time and ended up separating a few months after the situation. But being with me for so long, she had kind of gotten to the point that weird shit tends to happen around me. But for a span of about 4 or 5 months, the activity got out of hand to the point where I had actually started documenting it. I wish I still had the evidence to post. So literally, pretty much daily, we had started experiencing paranormal occurrences. Things falling over when no one was near them. Door opening by themselves. Hearing someone when you were definitely alone. White orbs flying by, black orbs on other days. The thing is, they'll fly right by you, and if you follow them with your eye, which wasn't easy as the speed they moved at was outrageously fast, they would fly right into the wall and vanish through it. There was one thing that really made me start documenting this shit, and here it is. So we all had all of our gaming systems hooked up to one TV, but I ran out of games to play on my PS3 and Wii at the time, so usually the only system that we would usually turn on was the Xbox 360. All we ever really used it for was to connect to our phones via USB or wire to play our music and watch anime. Or maybe we would download download shows onto our phones through the media center. But we'd always, connect it to something, and it was always on. So one day we were just listening to music on the Xbox. It's in the media center when we noticed that on the little Connect screen, there's 3 people registered in the room. Problem is, we were alone. Not only in the room, we were alone in the house. The other problem was how fucking impossible it was for a person to be where said person was registering. We had bunk beds, and on the top bunk was a huge pile of clean clothes that we didn't feel like folding. So according to the Xbox, there was somebody standing over our head occupying the same exact space as the top bunk bed and the clothes. More specifically, going through the bed and clothes. Well, when we first noticed this, we reset the Xbox to see if the Xbox was just tweaking out, but still. We said fuck it. So, this is the weird part. We turned on the Xbox every single day for the same purpose. Sometimes it was there, sometimes it wasn't. When it was, we would check it out every now and then to see what it was doing. Sometimes it just stood there, sometimes it would wave, and sometimes it would even look to have been, dancing. So me knowing nobody would ever believe me, if I told them this every now and then, I would take a few seconds of recordings of this. I think I had 3 or 4. So on another day, we're all just listening to music sitting on the bed playing cards silently. That's when music stops for no reason. Confused, we look up to see only to find that the voice command had been activated. Problem is, neither one of us said anything. So I pull out my phone, start recording the TV screen and explaining what had just been going on. And even though me and my girl at the time were completely silent, according to the Xbox, someone that none of us could see or hear was speaking. Pretty much just showing that little mic icon with the sound waves emanating even though the room was completely silent. Now, all of this happening and other undocumented occurrences going on, I opened the notepad on my phone and started actually logging everything that I could remember happening when it would happen. I had about 2 months of logs on the phone. Then, for 2 more days, nothing happened. Then, on the 3rd day after making the log, I heard somebody in the bathroom on my way to go to it, so I stopped and logged before going in. When I got inside, I logged that no one was actually in the bathroom, and I just, hit the save button. Felt the phone pulled out of my hand. I was a bit startled, but I picked the phone up and made an entry for that incident too. I then used the bathroom and went back to my room with my girlfriend. Continued playing Assassin's Creed. I decided to replay out of boredom, and I sat down on the bed and grabbed the PS3 controller with my right hand, and with my left hand I placed my HTC One cell phone on the bed next to me between me and the MS. While playing, I got a text message from a friend. Without pausing, because I was in a safe place in the game, I picked up the phone and looked at the message. I replied and placed it right back at the same spot. 3 minutes later, I decided, fuck this, I'm tired of being bored, and asked my lady if she wanted to go out for dinner. She said yeah, and we got up and started getting dressed and ready to go out. So I get up, change my pants, and immediately go to grab my phone to put it in my pocket. I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't forget it, but it's gone. So I asked the lady if she's seen it. She said the last time she saw it was when it was in the bed between us. I replied, yeah, me too. So I go on a rampage looking for it, checking the room 4, even 5 times. So confused as to where it could have gone, I even took the sheets and blankets off the bed and shook them out, expecting my phone to fall out, but it never even did. So I decided, fuck it. I'll find it when I get back home and finish dressing myself. Just as I'm finished putting on my scarf and hoodie, I look down on the bed and there it is. Sitting right on the bed in the exact same spot where I'd left it, right on top of the mess of sheets I'd pulled off the bed. I look at my girlfriend and I ask her where'd she find it. She replied, find what? Told her to look, and she looked down, not knowing what I was talking about, and reiterated, find what? I answered, my phone, where'd you find it? She looked at me with a confused look on her face and said, I didn't. What do you mean? If you didn't find it, where'd it come from? I thought you found it. No, I thought you found it. Okay, whatever. I just picked it up, put it in my pocket, but later disappeared again, but this time I never found it again. I don't know what I'd seen. This is an experience I had when I was around 14 or 15 years old. So maybe 2004, 2005. I lived in the country of Southwest Virginia. I was a typical country boy. I'd just gotten old enough for my mom and stepdad to trust me raccoon hunting alone. That night, just as the sun was setting, I took the dogs out like I had done before. Went to our hunting grounds, maybe 2-mile walk from home. The hunting ground had a very old house that I've had other paranormal experiences with, but that's for another time. Turned the dogs loose and waited for them to open. A few minutes passed and nothing. This isn't that strange, but after waiting for maybe a half hour and nothing, it was very odd. We didn't have great coon dogs, and normally if I couldn't find a raccoon sent soon, they would just strike a deer track or something, but I heard nothing from them. Began to walk around and call for them, but I got no response. Kept walking and noticed the entire ridgeline to my right had a red glow from the other side of the ridge emanating from the holler. Thought to myself, I guess the farmer is clearing brush. Has a massive fire burning, so I went to check. Wanted to make sure it wasn't a forest fire. But as I got closer to the top of the ridge, I got an uneasy feeling and noticed the light was not from a fire. No smell of smoke. The light wasn't flickering as a light from a flame would. And it was unnaturally bright red, like how a stoplight on a dark corner will cast a red, creepy glow on everything. And mind you, this is in the middle of a forest and a cow pasture with no electrical power. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong, and I got very scared. I was carrying a single-shot 20-gauge shotgun with birdshot, but my pack happened to have a few leftover buckshot and slug shells. So as quickly and as quietly as possible loaded the slug and kept 2 buckshot shells in my hand. Scared, I backed away and took the long way around to get back home so I could get as far away from that thing as possible. Got back, told my mom and stepdad what I'd seen. My stepdad scolded me for leaving the dogs in the woods, and he thought I was making up a long story being lazy. Didn't even go after the dogs. But about a week after this happened, I woke up and walked into the living room. He jumped up and said I'd seen that red light that scared you. It scared me too. He'd been hunting near the same place, but not quite. He said he had seen 3 bright red flashes that lit everything around him up enough that he could have read a newspaper. That was the end of it. We never had another red light experience after that. I don't know what I experienced, and it's been almost bothering me, but part of me regrets not walking the extra 25 yards to see over the ridgeline to see. Maybe that was smart, actually. My teenage hunting trips on a haunted property. This all happened in the rural area of Southwest Virginia. I was a teenager when all this happened. 14 or 15, not old enough to have a driver's license. We was poor and didn't have cable TV or internet, and it was the time of dial-up even if we did. And so what I had to entertain myself with normally was just hunting. I would often be hunting squirrels or rabbits after school, and at night we had coon hounds for raccoon hunting in the summer and on weekends. The property owners around us were nice enough to let us hunt, so I was always respectful to what they said. One of the wishes of the farm to the left was for us, if we could all hunt, as if we wanted to, but stay out of the abandoned houses in the middle holler. We would use it as a tool shed for extra barbed wire and fence posts and whatnot. Of course, as a teenager, I couldn't resist taking a peek, but made sure I didn't disturb anything. It was an old mansion at the time. It was a 2-story with an attic and a basement. It had a slave quarters with it and shackles in the basement walls. I'm not sure when it was abandoned, but I could tell it had never had indoor plumbing or electricity added to it. I assume it had not been lived in for a long time because of this. However, it was remarkably sound, like all the glass was still and the windows and the floors and the walls hadn't rotten. Couldn't even see much damage from a leaking roof. I also couldn't see any signs that animals used it, like raccoons chewing up on the walls or in the den. Never seen any scat droppings. And anyways, like I said, the farmer was nice enough to let me hunt, so for the most part I respected his wishes. Didn't go into the house, because he could easily deny my hunting rights. This house was also in the holler next to my red glowing light experience. If anybody'd like to read about that, check my profile. Often my stepdad would be with me, but I'd also take the coon dogs out and go hunting alone. When hunting dogs, you let them loose. You wait for them to run a raccoon to a tree. Depending on how hot the track is, it might take a while, and the direction they run might turn 3 or 4 times. So while waiting for them to howl or tread, you sit and wait in the chase. Or treat, sorry. While standing, you don't need a light and you don't need to waste batteries, so you turn it off and wait in the dark oftentimes. You can just see better without a light once your eyes are fully adjusted to the dark anyways. So many times, even though this house wasn't near the road or any source of light, other than what we carried, we could sit and watch what looked like a candle being carried through the house from the windows, even though nothing around it could possibly be reflecting any light. We could hear knocks and bumps coming from that house, but I could explain that as an animal rummaging around, even though it seemed like animals kept a 50-yard gap from the house. Even the cows wouldn't graze that close. Often lights would run dead if we stayed on long enough in that holler. Again, I could chalk that up to a coincidence. Once, I can't remember if it was in the early spring or in the late fall, but I had been squirrel hunting in a light jacket as the temperature was chilly, but not cold by any stretch. As I reached the back property, close to 2 miles from home, the temperature suddenly dropped, and an incredibly strong wind set in. It was maybe 30 miles an hour wind sustained. I started to get coldest I've ever been. I'd been winter camping and sat in a deer stand when the temperature was 0, but I wasn't dressed for this, and I knew I had to take shelter, and that house was the only thing that could help me, so I made my way in. The relief of being out of the wind was instant. I could feel pain in my face, and the hands and the skin I had exposed started to warm back up. It was fantastic. Since I was already in, I decided to look around again. I went upstairs and checked in all the rooms. It was completely empty. Same with the ground floor. Besides the fence equipment the farmer kept in the front area, so it was all pretty boring. I made my way to the basement. It was dark, but my hunting pack is always having a flashlight for backup with hunting raccoons. As I opened the door and looked down the steps, I got that feeling that I shouldn't go down. But being a teenage boy with my manhood on the line and not to be scared and a 20-gauge shotgun in my hands, I went down the steps. The atmosphere felt heavy. The air felt musty and stale. I looked around, and my area was bare other than some old shelves on the wall to my left and those rusted chains mounted to the wall on my right. Walked over, touched them, and as soon as I did, bam! Heard a door upstairs slam close hard. Now it was during a windstorm, so I was willing to chalk it up to the wind, but the house was closed up and not drafty. Made my way back up in the atmosphere upstairs, same as the basement. Cold and heavy. It was like I was no longer welcome. I'd warmed up, but the wind was still blowing, but it died down. So I left and made my way back home. That's the most interesting thing that happened to me at that house. It's been 15 years since I visited it. When I was a teen, I didn't have a fancy camera phone or record any of this. But I would also be trespassing now. I'm not really sure I'd get permission to go ghost hunting. And no, I will not give the location of this house. It's not my property. And I don't want the farmer's land disturbed. He was nice to me for all those years. I won't disrespect him like that. I just thought you all might enjoy some hunting tales from years ago. My workplace is haunted. I love ghost stuff, but don't mess with it because I don't want no bad juju. The restaurant I work in is an old one, but I don't have much of any history on it, haven't searched for it. I can tell you that we have a banquet room leading up to a couple set of stairs which we use frequently for weddings and parties. Probably a few weeks to a month into my job, around mid-September, I was asked to carry some dishes up to the banquet room. This way we would have them ready to go for the wedding party. No big deal. Carry said dishes up, having to make several trips. When I get up to the banquet room each time, I slightly feel like something's different. I don't think too much of it though, and just let it slide as I was in work mode. And just to note, I am an individual that's very in touch with how I feel and the vibes I get from people. At least that's what I think, or I'm just nuts, who knows. But anyways, a couple of weeks go by, and again I'm asked to take some dishes upstairs. This was probably mid-October. Being the team player I am, of course I'm going to help my coworkers out, so, let's do the work thing. The feeling is stronger this time. It wasn't a sense of goosebumps or chills down my spine, it was just a gut feeling of something feeling off. Finished what I needed to do and went downstairs to jokingly ask the waitress if she ever got a funny feeling upstairs. My boss turned the corner looking at me as the waitress answered. And with a giggly smile on her face, she said yes. This building, mainly the banquet room upstairs, is haunted. She doesn't like going up there either. My boss, the one who turned the corner, told me about a ghost hunting team's done an EVP in the past. That's where a voice said a bartender's name. Some other stories I've told have mentioned bar stools being flipped over like it was closing time, and as well as a blood-curdling scream heard out of the hallway. Not even in the banquet room. But what creeps me out the most about it was that I could feel something off without ever knowing the building was haunted. Throws your senses for a whirl. Trying to distinguish whether it was a bad feeling like I should avoid the banquet room when I'm alone, or if it's just my nerves getting the best of me. It's hard to tell whether or not it was an energy that disliked me or didn't want me there. And now that I know it's haunted, I've been dreading going to work. I feel like I have to go up there alone again. I make sure that I'm not the last person to leave the building because I don't want to risk having an entanglement with the unknown. I also feel that I got that gut feeling as a warning sign. Something wasn't right and my senses knew it. It kind of tells me not to be alone in that place. Always listen to your gut. My lovely granny who raised me said hi to me this morning. She died last month. This year I'm celebrating my 30th birthday. It's going to be the first time since birth I'm not celebrating this moment with the brave lady who raised me, along with my grandfather. My grandmother died after years and years of suffering. It's a relief, but damn, it hurts. A few hours before her death, the last day I saw her, I slept a few hours to recover from this terrible night as she asked for mercy. And in this dream, I saw her dead laying on the bed. Her husband held her and cried. I immediately sent a message to my companion to tell him about this disturbing picture I've seen a few times, since the idea of losing her caused me huge anxiety. Then, right after this nightmare, I learned about her. She passed away as I was peacefully sleeping in my bed. It's been a month she's gone now. It's strange, but I totally stopped dreaming about her. And this morning I just woke up in my family's house. I heard the distinct voice saying hi. It was nice and sweet, and I responded yes. That was as my grandfather, who sleeps in his room next to mine, answered, "Yeah?" I asked him if he was calling me, and he said no. He used to work in a funeral home for years as a counselor. I know grief may lead to hallucinations. Have you ever had a dream about your loved ones who eventually died moments ago? Do you think it's pure coincidence? A simple sign of empathy, since I felt extremely worried about her. Do you think I myself talked while I was asleep? I know a lot of my friends confirmed I'm a sleep talker. But anyways, that's not the most thrilling experience I witnessed, but I'm curious about these two moments. First, the dream. Secondly, the call. Respect your belief. I'm open-minded. Feel free to share. Take care. Speaking in tongues while sleeping with my friend. When I were younger, I used to live half of the week at my ex-boyfriend's flat. We call him Christopher. It's in central Paris near a park called Le But Charmant in Rue Carduchy. I don't know how to say that. Can't say that. It was easier to me to stay in the heart of the city since I studied at university from Monday to Friday. This guy used to have a mutual friend, who's also his ex-girlfriend. I know, right? Don't judge us, please. They were named Alice. Back in the days, the three of us slept in the same room and shared a very powerful relationship altogether. It was almost like a love triangle, but anyways, my experience is not about a personal story. Alex and Christopher are really sensitive people who felt energies and spirits. I never judged them since I experienced baffling situations as well, but hey, I want to stay a pragmatic person. But I still can't explain what happened these nights when Christopher and I talked while we were asleep. Alice listened and told us everything in the morning right away. It happened a few times. I have no memories of these events. She was absolutely sure that we were speaking in tongues. There's no doubt about that. The disturbing part, we don't understand and we can't read Latin. She even took notes as we, had some of these sentences and they were part of the Bible. Some of them were related to Lazarus. While Christopher firmly believed in God and is a Christian, a Catholic, I'm not a religious person at all. Of course, I have studied and read the Bible and some other religious books, but I cannot tell you the entire parts by heart. As she's sensitive to this invisible world, she really felt it was something disturbing and unusual. I really want to know this is 100% real and I'm not faking it. I know I often laugh and talk in the night while I'm fully asleep, but this Latin episode never happened to me again. There's always this stereotype about creepy legends in Latin, especially because religion is scary and often used in films and books to play with our deepest fears. Do you think it's possible for our minds to use forgotten data so that we do something possible, like speaking in tongues? Do you have any other theory? Is it related to ghosts or maybe entities? Sometimes I think about this whole story and I still can't figure out what happened. Thanks for your theories and possible explanations. I will say you know more than you think you know. Anybody else ever have dreams in languages that you failed at in high school? I have. Whatever that's going on in my house has me sleeping in the living room. I purchased a home roughly 2 years ago. That was after living in an apartment that was located right behind a cemetery. I have videos on my profile that showed 2 of the many things that have happened there. Here at the house, seems like they were either followed or what was already there just kept doing its thing. That includes my 3 children, a female that's 12, 10, and a 5-year-old male. I'm a single father, and this thing does not bother them, only myself. It all started about 3 days after we moved in. I was in the kitchen and you can see the hallway that leads to the kids' room. I saw what looked like one of my kids run down the hall and into the rooms. Right after that, all 3 of my actual kids came running in from the front door from playing outside. I just thought, okay, whoa. After that, I would sleep in my room on the opposite side of the house from my kids' rooms. I'd feel like one of them was coming in and laying on the bed. I'll look over to ask if they were okay and no one will be there. On one particular night, the same thing happened, only this time I felt a kid's arm lay across my back. I rolled over and what looked like a girl smaller than my daughter jumped out of the bed and went to the bathroom. And this thing moved, I mean it moved. Went around 12 feet in a matter of roughly a second. Since then, it doesn't fail that at least 2 times a week something paranormal happens. You can either hear a door in the house close and I'm at home and the kids are at school. The occasional voice of a man or a woman having a conversation somewhere in the house, and, of course, the bed indents. It got to the point where I had 3 paranormal investigators come and we all saw the girl run behind the kitchen island. It's not scary things going on, it's more that I feel uncomfortable sleeping in my room, so I just lay on the couch with the TV and a few lights on. At the corner of my eye, I could still see something darting in the hallways. Ghost in the apartment. My father was involved. Whatever I ask him about what happened that night in the apartment, he insists it never even happened. He's the type that stays away from the paranormal, including speaking about it. This incident happened when I was a baby, young enough for a baby to cry in the middle of the night. My crib was set up right next to my parents' bed, close enough to check in on me. My mother heard my cries and was about to get up until my dad sat up and said, "Don't worry, I'll get her." He went around the bed and picked me up, sat me in his arms and left the room. My mom sat her head back down on the pillow, listening to me cry in the kitchen as my dad paced back and forth. This was when it happened. My mother felt something in the room, but didn't see it really turn, and something grabbed the back of her head. She said it felt like a hand. Grabbed her and lifted her head back up and she froze. Bent her head back, making her neck bulge out. It was as if something was trying to snap her neck. At that moment, she screamed out my father's name. Her head fell back onto the pillow and she quickly turned to the door and saw it. A white figure darting out of the room and into the hallway. My father, meanwhile, heard my mother scream and he ran toward the hallway. Saw the same figure dart out and run into the hallway bathroom. Father, with me still in his arms, ran forward, turned on the bathroom lights to face whoever was in there, found no one, went into the bathroom to see my mother sitting up in shock. "Did you see that?" My dad nodded. They realized quickly that it was a spirit, a malicious one, and they both spent the night in the living room. They moved a few months later. I asked my mother if she ever saw it again, or see anything out of the ordinary, things moving out of place or cold chills. but he said that was the only incident. Whenever I bring it up with my father, he denies it and tells me your mom's lying, or I don't remember that happening. That was until a few years ago he let it slip. Years of denial shattered when my mother and I were talking about other ghost stories. My dad listened to our conversation and said, "Remember that apartment when we saw one?" The moment it came out of his mouth, I saw his expression morph into surprise, like a secret he wasn't supposed to tell. I said, "I thought you said you didn't remember." And he just went quiet. I've had a lot of weird things happen to me. Dreams before deaths. I'm in college now, but from the age of 9 through 17, I went to a music camp a few hours from my house in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. I loved it every year. It was magical. It was all thanks to a very old woman who owned the property with her husband till the 50s. Anyways, she was very elderly, and her oldest son lived with her and was also pretty old. He ends up passing away beginning of the semester in August from long-term illness and complications. I didn't know him very well. He only conducted for the most advanced students, who I wasn't grouped with until my last few years. Can't remember the days of the week exactly, but for ease I'll say I had a very long and difficult dream on Monday night. Can't remember the details of it very clearly, but I remember waking up in the middle of the night panting as if I had been holding my breath. So I was hot and my heart was pounding and a sense of dread so bad I had to turn my lights on just to be sure there wasn't a maniac about to stab me. I managed to go back to sleep and continue my routine on Tuesday as if it hadn't happened. I later find out Friday that he had died late into Monday night and early Tuesday morning. Sad news that it hit, but also got me realizing that I had woken up panicking the same night. Fast forward to winter break. I have a similar dream and wake up panting and gasping. I was hot and disoriented and scared again. This time it was actually Friday morning around 2 a.m. because I checked my phone to use the flashlight to scan my room and make sure it was safe. I go back to sleep and wake up to texts from friends in several different states who had gone to camp with me. The sweet old woman who had co-founded the camp had passed early in the morning. This time it hit even harder that I had that dream again. Last instance. I had a neighbor who lived across the street and over one house to the left. I'd seen him as a kid, but as I grew older, I'd started to forget about what she looked like and her voice and such. This was after high school. I was maybe 20 then. It had been years since I'd had any bad dreams like the ones I'd had with the camp-founding family, and, well... Anyways, it was summer. My mom comes and asks if I'd be willing to help her neighbor since she'd recently had a stroke and her family was out of state at that point and had been looking bored and didn't see why I didn't just go and do it. So I do, and we have a blast. I set up a routine. Every Monday I take her grocery shopping, and every Tuesday I go in and visit her and cook and just generally be silly. It was honestly a highlight looking back at it. So I'm leaving Thursday, and she says she'll call me if she needs me Monday, because some people had known about her condition and brought her food and goodies. She doesn't know if she needs to shop again so soon. I go home and forget relatively soon, and, well, she'd said anything... Well, I don't even know what they're writing here, but then Saturday night I have another horrid dream and I wake up as usual, panting hot and scared. Now, since it had been a few years since the last dreams of this scale, I don't immediately put it together. It's the weekend and still summer vacation, so I just kicked my sheet off and finished my night. Then Monday rolls around. She doesn't call. I remember that maybe she doesn't need me. I let it slide. I go out with friends that night, and then Thursday comes, no one calls, and I think maybe she's got somebody else, or she's tired, or something. Next Monday rolls around. I get no calls, so I go over and ring the bell. I call her phone, it goes to voicemail. She also keeps her car in the garage and has a fence that keeps you from going to the front door and knocking, so I have no idea if the car is actually in there, and I can't peek into her living room or kitchen because of the locked fence. I go home and wait for Thursday, which comes and goes with no news, so I figured that she's dumped me and gotten an actual caretaker or something. It's not 2 weeks after. My mom breaks the news. While I was asleep, she had seen the ambulance and the police outside. They'd taken her body to the morgue. She had died 2 weeks prior when I had my last horrific dream from another stroke and had been in the house ever since till her son had to come check on her. I was the last person to see her speak and see her alive. I've had some weird things happen to me. Spirits. As a kid, I often called for my parents in the night. It was because I was afraid of the dark. I was afraid of what was in the dark, specifically in my closet. As normal and cliche as it is, I always felt much safer when the doors were closed. However, there would be times when if I slept with my back facing my room in the doorway, I'd get the feeling and mental image of a large figure either coming from deep my bed or maybe materializing in my room and running its fingers down my back. There were two forms it takes. One is a woman, and I can't tell if she's young or old, but she seems sad and angry. I think she lost her child, because her touch, as frightening as it was, tended to be more gentle, though I could feel the rage in her. She tended to materialize more in the room. The second's far bigger, and its touch more frightening. It's this giant figure draped in seaweed or rags or something. Like a mummy, but not all stiff and decomposing. Seems more remorseful, but still has something horrific behind it. They don't seem to be very active now, and since I'm much older, I haven't really been in tune with them, you could say them. But my odd theory is they're somehow connected. Possibly they lost a child. Maybe they were together and suffered. I also felt things in my dad's office, the living room, and the guest bathroom. My parents have been in this house for nearly 30 years and haven't really had anything odd happen to them at the time, but as far as I know, there isn't anything that happened in the house before them, or the land it's built on. Maybe they're attached to the house, or maybe they're attached to me. But at college, they can manifest as easily because of my current state or the sheer number of people around me. An old man keeps appearing to my family. My dad, my oldest brother, and a family friend had both seen this old man at different points in their life. When my dad was about 14 in his childhood home, he went downstairs to get a drink. He doesn't remember what time it was. It could have been 3 a.m. or it could have been 11 p.m. He doesn't remember. The living room door was already open. The hallway light was shining into the living room, making it dimly lit. My dad went to walk into the living room, but noticed an old man sitting in the chair in the left-hand corner. It was as he were facing directly into the room. My dad said he didn't feel scared or intimidated, he was just confused. My dad and the old man were just looking at each other for a solid 10 seconds before my dad walked into the living room, went to the kitchen, got his water, and came back. When he came back out into the kitchen, the old man was still sitting there, but his body was still the same direction as before. But the old man's head was facing my dad's direction. My dad walked past the old man once again and went back to bed. The next morning, my dad asked his dad, my granddad obviously, who his friend was and who was in the house. My granddad said he didn't have any friends over. About 20 years later, when my family moved into the house I now live in, I wasn't born at this point. My brother, who's about 7 years old, was the last one into the house. As you walk in the front door, the staircase is slightly to the right, but basically in front of you. My brother started screaming and crying, and my parents came running through. My dad asked him what was wrong, and my brother pointed up to the top of the staircase and explained that there was an old man up there staring at him. Just after Christmas of 2019, so not that long ago, my mom had 2 of her friends over. They've never been in the house before. My mom shouted me down, and she told me to ask a friend who's a bit older, but he just saw at the kitchen door. I asked him. He explained he looked up and saw an old man just standing there looking across at him, and then he just disappeared. I asked him for more details, but he struggled to describe what the old man looked like. He could only say that he looked relatively normal. I think my dad may have experienced a dimension shift. First of all, my dad hates liars, so I know for a fact he wouldn't bullshit me and wouldn't keep a lie up for years like this. My dad and his friend Jamie were doing an all-nighter. They were about 17 years old, and we were out of their hometown. They went and sat down at a local primary school at around 2 or 3 a.m. They sat at the front entrance. The playground is around the back of the building. My dad says he closed his eyes and he has no idea if he fell asleep for 10 seconds, a minute, or even an hour. He has no clue. But he suddenly woke up to Jamie standing above him, looking down on him. My dad asked him what he was doing, and Jamie said something along the lines of, "Oh, nothing, I need to piss." Jamie started to walk away and about to turn the corner. My dad could see Jamie's shadow getting smaller and smaller. My dad once again closed his eyes and then fell asleep. Again, doesn't really know how long he slept for, but once he woke up to Jamie standing above him again. Confused, my dad asked him what he was doing. Jamie gave the exact same response of needing to go piss, and he started walking away again. My dad suddenly sat up and watched Jamie's shadow get smaller and smaller. Obviously, my dad was confused, so he got up and walked down, and my dad turned the corner a few seconds after Jamie. He looked down the long path and Jamie wasn't to be seen. My dad got freaked out and left the premises. Then a big gust of wind went right past my dad but didn't get to my dad, and it freaked him out even more. My dad ran home. The next day, my dad went up to Jamie's house and asked him what the fuck happened. So after my dad explained his side, Jamie looked really confused. Jamie explained that him and my dad were at the big tree in the playground the entire time with a big gust of wind hitting Jamie. When he turned around, my dad was gone from the entire area. So my dad and Jamie were both with each other, but in two places at once, and one of each set disappeared. Anybody have a theory on what this could have been? What the fuck is going on? Please help or send advice. I've been living with my boyfriend and his family for a little while now because of the COVID quarantine. They recently moved to a new house and I've been sleeping on the couch in the basement since my boyfriend has a twin bed still and doesn't fit the both of us. I started to notice some weird stuff going on while attempting to sleep down there. There was this toy that was basically a transformer jet airplane with a little speaker that made noises like it was flying. This toy started to go off seemingly at random throughout the night. The first few nights of this, it didn't freak me out enough to think anything was up. Maybe just an old messed up toy with a stuck button. Then a few nights later, it woke me up exactly 3 a.m. going off like crazy. It sounded like somebody was repeatedly pressing the button almost. I actually got really fed up because it woke me up in the middle of the night and ended up putting me upstairs. Despite it being on a different level, I could still hear it going off. That same night, I could hear footsteps going up and down the stairs leading to the basement. But I did end up finally falling back asleep. The next day, my boyfriend's mom returned the toy to the basement. At about 6 a.m., I was awoken again by the toy going off like all hell. It was going off so often that it wouldn't even complete the noise before starting again. I was mad at this point, began yelling at the toy and the spirit to stop and leave me alone. It got worse, then worse, and it got worse the more I yelled at it. Eventually grabbed the toy and threw it onto the back porch. For the next few nights, nothing happened. That is until tonight. I woke up at 4 a.m. to water being poured or streaming onto my feet. Jumped up to investigate where it was coming from and what had just happened. As soon as I jumped up, the steady stream stopped. Only a few droplets of water were coming down once it stopped only a few seconds later. I investigated the ceiling and saw no water damage or sign of leakage. There was a pool of water on the leather couch that I sleep on, but I couldn't find an actual source for the water. Checked on all the animals and all of them were fast asleep. I was worried that the cat had peed on the couch. Even Wen made sure all the members of my boyfriend's family were asleep in case it was one of them trying to pull a prank on me. But they were all still in bed passed out. Hadn't even told anybody of the weird occurrences beside my boyfriend. Really don't know what's going on. Saw something about water poltergeist, and I tried to look into this weird phenomenon, and I've never heard of water poltergeist before, but it seems to fit the situation. My daughter's friend. So I tried asking my daughter more questions. Wasn't getting any answers. So my 8-year-old took it upon herself to ask her more questions while they were playing. My daughter said that she plays with Ada through her memories, and that Ada is real, a regular person. And another thing, as I showed her the pictures again, she wasn't sure who Ada or who Sarah were right away. She said, "Who are they again?" She recognized them, but didn't know who they were right away. Once I told her, she knew though. I believe it may have been because she hasn't seen Ada in a while, and Ada showed herself as a child to my daughter, and the pictures are of adults. Although the first time I showed her the pictures months ago, she knew who Ada was right away. And when shown Sarah, she said, "That's me." So my daughter just turned 4, about a year ago. She started talking about her friend Ada all the time. Thought she was just playing and using her imagination. She never actually would play with the friend in front of anybody, so she would just tell me about her friend who apparently met at Nana's, great-grandmother on father's side. I never really thought too much of it at first. One day we were pulling to a Walmart parking lot. My daughter pointed towards an apartment building next door. "That's where my friend Ada died." I was like, what the fuck? Tried to ask her what she meant by that, but she just repeated it and then changed the subject, as a toddler often does. I was weirded out, but again just shrugged it off. A few months later, we're pulling into the same parking lot. She said it again. That's when I knew it wasn't normal toddler imagination. It was just too strange. Tried to ask her more about Ada, and she would just bring her up, but couldn't get any real answers. She only brought Ada up occasionally, so it wasn't something we would talk about every day. It all came to a head one day when my daughter's stepmom texted me asking me if I knew about my daughter's friend Ada. She said I did, and she told me that she'd been talking about this Ada Carter and her sister Sarah. She decided to Google their names. She found record of the sisters, with pictures, and sent them to me. The girl who was Sarah looked exactly like my daughter, only a young adult instead. They have the same big black eyes and black hair, same features. They look related for sure. The girl Ada looked exactly like my oldest daughter also. Seriously weird. But the icing on the cake was that there was also a picture of their mother, whose name was Betsy Larson, the last name of my kid's father's grandparents, the last name of my kid's Nana, whose house my daughter had apparently met Ada at. And the thing that gave us no doubt about it was the same picture of the mother that we found online was hanging in their Nana's house. The grandfather, who would have known these relatives, passed away years ago, so we couldn't ask him about them. I asked their Nana, and she doesn't know who they are. Ada, Sarah, and Betsy are all deceased. Ada passed away in the 1970s. Completely convinced that my daughters communicated with Ada's spirit, and almost believed that she may have been Sarah in a past life. The one thing that's strange is that my daughter says Ada's a little girl, just like her, but Ada died as an adult. There's no doubt that the people we found online are related to my kids and their father. They have distinct features that just made everything all the more convincing. My daughter said many things that have made me believe that she can see things beyond this realm. But this one is by far the most unexplainable. I'm convinced my daughter's ancestors have communicated with her. The York House Inn. My in-laws wanted to get a getaway trip for the weekend. Y'all live in South Carolina, right on the border near Georgia. My in-laws are fans of bed and breakfast type places, so typically the best ones to go to on vacation are in Charleston, South Carolina. That's a 4-hour drive they didn't feel like making. They found a historical house. It was in Georgia, called the York House. It was made into a bed and breakfast apparently some years ago. It's only maybe a half an hour or an hour drive. It was reasonably priced. They left on a Friday and arrived at the inn around the middle of the afternoon. The inn is L-shaped and has 2 floors. The balcony is on each floor and goes to the full length in front of the inn. Well, no one was at the hotel except a man working the front desk. They said the inside was quaint and, although old, had a rustic feel that was nice. The man behind the desk didn't have a lot of emotion to him, didn't speak much. Not unusual, but a little off-putting. They were brought to their room and the man left. My mother-in-law got an instant uneasy feeling. She didn't say anything to my father-in-law because she didn't want to start anything or make a big deal out of it, but she definitely didn't want to go into the room, so she suggested that they go out onto the balcony. The balcony had many wooden rocking chairs on it. My mother-in-law said she kept looking out of the corner of her eye and felt like somebody was sitting next to her, but every time she looked, there would be nobody there. They sat there for maybe an hour or so. They went out for dinner. The mother-in-law said the creepy feeling went away while they were gone, but instantly came back when they went back to the inn. My mother-in-law and my father-in-law go down to get her purse from the car. And while there, my father-in-law said he kept getting the feeling like he was being watched from an upstairs window. Of course, every time he looked, there was no one there. It was around 9 p.m. by this time. When he returned to the room, my mother-in-law finally broke her silence and said, "I'll stay here the night, but I know I'm not going to sleep at all if I do." My father-in-law, who also was getting really creeped vibe but not saying anything, decided that they would leave and go home at 9 p.m. at night. As they were going downstairs, they came up and the man working there, he had his hand all held out already, like he was expecting them to come down and give him the key to their room. They drove an hour and a half into the night back home, and Mother refused to bring any belongings into their room in the house and ended up throwing her whole coach purse away. That was because she was that level of creeped out.